Preface. I know where you are right now, because I sat where you're sitting. Maybe it's late at night where you are. It usually is, when a man finally goes looking for a book like this. The phone is somewhere near you. It's always somewhere near you. And on that phone, there is a conversation. And at the bottom of that conversation, there is a message you have read more times than you have read anything else in your life. Maybe it's her saying no. Maybe it's her saying something worse than no, that you were never serious, that you treated her like an option, that she doesn't understand why you're doing this. Maybe it's just two polite words, and the silence after them, which is the loudest thing you have ever heard. And you have a question burning a hole in your chest. Not how do I get her back? You've been through that one already, in the first weeks, and some part of you already knows the answer. No, the question that's eating you now is the one you asked her, or wanted to ask her, and never got a real answer to. Why would she think that? After everything. After the years. After all the attention, the loyalty, the waiting, the gifts, the messages, the way you organized your entire inner life around her name, how could she look at all of that and say you weren't serious? I asked that question. I asked it out loud, and then I asked it silently for the better part of a year, and I am going to answer it for you in this book, honestly, because nobody answered it for me, and it cost me a long time in the dark. Here is my credential for talking to you this way. I gave a woman 4 years, not 4 years of a relationship, 4 years of a pursuit that I called love, and that she, I now understand, mostly didn't know she was in. I met her when I was in my mid-30s, and she was young and quick and lovely, and I built a cathedral in my chest with her name on it, and I checked my phone for her the way other men check the news. When I finally put my cards on the table, late, far too late, in the most protected and deniable way I could engineer, she said no. And she said it in a sentence that took my legs out from under me. She said she doesn't answer men who aren't serious, men who treat her as an option. 4 years, and I was the one who wasn't serious. I did everything wrong after that. I asked her to explain herself. I drafted long messages, proving my case, laying out the evidence, the timeline, the receipts of my devotion. I cycled between worship and resentment. I deleted her and re-added her and deleted her again until she solved the problem for me by blocking me, and that block stood for more than a year, and I told myself the whole time that I was the one who had been wronged. I wasn't, and I wasn't a villain either. I was something more ordinary and more painful than either of those things, and so are you, and we'll get to exactly what that is. This book is not going to teach you how to win her back. She is not coming back, and somewhere below the noise you know that, and one of the kindest things I can do for you is refuse to sell you the fantasy. There are 1,000 videos out there that will sell it to you. No contact as a trick, silence as a trap, become attractive, and she'll return. That whole industry feeds on men in exactly your condition, because a man in your condition will pay anything for one more maybe. I know, because I was a paying customer. What this book is going to do instead is get you out. Out of the checking. Out of the courtroom in your head where you keep presenting your evidence to a judge who never arrives. Out of the grief, which is real grief and which nobody around you takes seriously because you were never even together. Out of the anger, which frightens you a little, as it should, and out of the version of this story where you were a fool, because you were not a fool, and the book will not treat you as one. You are an intelligent man. That was never the problem. In fact, as we'll see, your intelligence was one of the main tools the obsession used against you. We're going to walk through the whole thing in order. How a maybe gets manufactured out of a no, because that is what happened, and it happened inside you, not inside her. How her kindness became your evidence. What the checking actually was, and what it cost you in the places you weren't looking. the work, the friends, the years. What her refusal actually meant in her language, which is a different language from yours. Why asking her to explain herself was always doomed, and what you were really asking for when you asked it. What this depression is made of, and the point at which it stops being something a book can carry and needs a doctor's hands, because that point exists, and pretending otherwise gets men killed. And then, the way out. Not the trick version. The real one. What to do with your hands, your phone, your evenings, your anger, and your attention in that order until the day comes, and it comes, when you realize you have been fine for a while without noticing. One more thing before we start. I am not going to tell you her name, and I'm not going to describe her in a way that would let you picture her too clearly, because she is not the point, and because you have your own name to put in that space. She was, in my case, a genuinely good person. That may also be true in yours. It changes nothing about what you have to do now, but it changes how you should do it, and we will hold on to that distinction all the way through. You can put this down without putting her down. In fact, that's the only way it stays down. Once and for all. That's the promise you want from this book, and I'll make it, with one honest condition. Once and for all is not a door you walk through. It's a direction you keep walking. There was no single day when I was cured. There was a first day when I did one thing differently, and that day is available to you immediately, tonight, before you sleep. So let me tell you how it started for me. Not because my story matters more than yours, but because when you watch it happen to another man, from the outside, you will see the machinery. And once you have seen the machinery, you can never fully unsee it, even in yourself. That's the crack where the light gets in. It started, as these things do, with an ordinary afternoon and a face and a feeling I mistook for information. Chapter 1. The day I manufactured a maybe. I saw her across the market on a Saturday afternoon, a few weeks before I was due to leave the country for work. Remember that detail, the leaving, because it turns out to matter more than almost anything else in this story. She was out with a friend, buying ordinary things. And I want to be precise about what happened in me, because the imprecise version, I fell for her, is exactly the kind of language that kept me trapped for 4 years. I didn't fall for her, I didn't know her. What happened is that 3 or 4 signals arrived at once. A face, a way of carrying herself, and then, when I found an excuse to speak to her, a quickness of mind I was not expecting, and my brain did what a hungry brain does with a handful of good data points. It drew the whole curve. In 30 seconds, I had extrapolated an entire woman, an entire future, an entire cure for an entire loneliness, from a sample size of one afternoon. You did this too. I need you to see that this is step 1 of the disease, and it happens before she has done anything at all. The woman you have been grieving was, in large part, drafted by you on the first day out of almost nothing. She then spent years failing to correct your draft. Not because she was cruel, but because she never knew the draft existed. I got her number that day. It was easy, which told me nothing, though I decided it told me everything. A young woman giving a polite, accomplished, well-spoken man her number in a public place, with her friend standing right there, is not a signal. It is a social transaction with a cost attached to refusing, and the cost of refusing is paid by her, not you, which is why she doesn't refuse. I have since learned to ask a simple question about every signal I ever collected. What would it have cost her to do otherwise? You should run your entire file of evidence through that one question. Watch how much of it dissolves. Now, why did it hit me so hard? I was not a boy. I was in my mid-30s, educated, settled in my profession, respected by people whose respect is hard to earn. I had done difficult things. And this is where I have to tell you something uncomfortable about men like us, because I suspect you are a man like us, or you wouldn't have picked up this book. The men who fall hardest into this trap are almost never the foolish ones. They're the intelligent, disciplined, slightly lonely ones. Men who have succeeded at everything that responds to effort, and who have quietly concluded, without ever saying it out loud, that love must also respond to effort. Our whole lives have taught us one lesson. If a result looks wrong, look deeper, work harder, and the system will eventually yield. It works on exams. It works on careers. It works on any machine. It does not work on a woman's heart, because a woman's heart is not a stuck system waiting for the right man to debug it. Her interest either arises or it doesn't. It can grow, yes, from something, not from nothing. And no amount of intellect applied from the outside can install it. But a clever man cannot accept "it isn't there" as a final answer, because he has never once in his life had to accept "it isn't there" as a final answer. So he does the thing he is best at. He studies, he gathers data, he builds a model. He finds a mechanism that explains why the observable behavior, her warmth, her friendliness, her failure to ever move 1 inch toward him, is actually consistent with hidden interest. She's shy. It's her culture. It's her family. She's testing me. She's young and doesn't know yet. The timing is wrong. And every one of those mechanisms is possible, which is the devil's own detail, because your clever mind only checks whether a story is possible. It never checks whether it's likely, and it never, ever checks what it would cost her for the story to be true. That's what I mean by manufacturing a maybe. She never handed me a maybe. I assembled one in my own workshop out of her ordinary kindness and my extraordinary need, and then I treated my own handiwork as a message from her. Every man in this trap has done the same. The maybe you've been living on for years. Go and look at it closely. Check the label. It was made by you. And here's where the leaving comes in. The detail I told you to remember. I met her weeks before I was going away for a long time. And I have talked now to enough men with this same story to tell you that this is not a coincidence. It is practically a signature of the type. We fall hardest exactly when the door is closing, because a closing door means the fantasy never has to face the weekday test. I would be gone before reality could get its hands on the thing. From a distance, everything she wrote could be polished into treasure, everything she didn't write could be explained by circumstance, and the imaginary woman could grow in peace, uncontradicted, at 4,000 kilometers range. Distance is a greenhouse for imaginary love. If your story includes long stretches where the whole relationship lived inside a phone, and I'd bet my house it does, then understand that most of what grew in there could only have grown in there. In open air, in weekday light, sitting across a real table twice a week, it would have died in a month, either into nothing or into something real. The greenhouse is what let it become 4 years. I want to close this chapter with the moment I now consider the true beginning of everything that went wrong, and it is not the moment I saw her. It's about an hour later. I was walking home, replaying the conversation, and I noticed a small strangeness. She had been friendly, but she had given me nothing to hold. No question about when we'd meet, no thread deliberately left hanging. And I remember the exact sensation. A tiny dip of disappointment, followed immediately within a second or two by a warm rush of explanation. Of course she'd be reserved. A young woman, a stranger, her friend right there. Of course. The dip lasted 1 second. The explanation was the rest of my day. That reflex, disappointment instantly converted into explanation, is the engine of the entire 4 years, and I promise you it is running in you right now, tonight, on far bigger material than a first conversation. Every time the data disappoints you, something in you steps forward like a defense lawyer and explains it away, and the explaining feels like insight. It is not insight. It is anesthesia. She did, as it happens, give me one real thing that first day. She was genuinely, observably glad to talk about ideas with someone who took her mind seriously. That was true, and it stayed true the whole 4 years, and it was the truest thing between us. My tragedy, and I'd learned this at the very end, when it was too late to matter, is that I took the one thing she actually offered and spent 4 years trying to melt it down and recast it as something she never offered at all. But before any of that, there was an afternoon in the hills, and a hand, mine, and what happened when I reached out with it, 3 times. That afternoon was the whole answer, delivered in the first month, and I spent the next 4 years refusing to open the envelope. Let me show you what was in it. Chapter 2. The hand she took back. A few days after the market, we went for a walk in the hills above the city. She brought her friend. I told myself the friend was decoration, a formality, a chaperone for appearances. It did not occur to me that the friend was policy. Young women do not bring a friend to meet a man they are hoping will hold their hand. They bring a friend to meet a man they have not yet decided is safe. The friend was information, and she was information I filed under furniture. It was a good afternoon. I want to be honest about that, because the trap is never built out of bad afternoons. She was funny. She asked real questions about my work and listened to the answers and asked better questions after that. Being the object of an intelligent young woman's genuine attention, when you have been starving for exactly that without knowing it, I can't describe what it does to a man's chest. It feels like an arrival. It feels like the beginning of the main part of your life. And then, on a rock ledge with the city spread out below us, I reached over and put my hand on hers. She went still. Then, after a moment, she reached forward with her other hand for the water bottle, and in the small rearrangement that followed, her hand came out from under mine and did not come back. No drama, no look. The conversation continued as if nothing had happened. I reached again later, on a low stone wall. During a warm and easy stretch of talk, same result. A gentle, unhurried, complete withdrawal folded so smoothly into ordinary movement that a bystander would have seen nothing at all. I reached a third time on the way down. That time she put her hands in her pockets. Now, sit with me in the car afterward, because this is where the 4 years were actually decided, not on the hill, but in my head, on the drive home. A woman had just declined my touch 3 times in 90 minutes. 3 times, from a standing start. And by the time I reached my street, do you know what I had concluded? I had concluded that it was progress. She hadn't pulled away sharply. She hadn't said anything. She hadn't ended the walk. She was gentle about it. And her gentleness, I decided, was the message. Not here, not yet, not with my friend watching. I took 3 refusals and fitted a trend line through them, and the line, in my hands, pointed up. Her gentleness was the cruelest part of the whole story. And I mean cruel to me, though none of it was meant. Because gentleness is exactly what lets a man tell himself it wasn't a refusal. If she had snapped at me, I'd have been wounded for a week and free for the rest of my life. Instead, she declined me the way well-raised women decline men every single day. Quietly, kindly, in a way designed to spare everyone embarrassment, in a way that costs her nothing socially and lets him keep his dignity. And men like me take the very kindness of the packaging as proof that the package isn't a no. So let me give you the rule, the one I'd carve over every school door if I could. Kindness is the wrapping, not the gift. A woman's warmth toward you is not information about her desire for you. Warmth is her character. Desire is her choice. They come from different rooms in her, and only one of those rooms has anything to do with you. Her interest shows up in one currency and one currency only. Movement toward you that she initiates, and that costs her something. She rearranges her day. She asks the next question about your life. She finds the excuse to see you. She finds it, unprompted. She moves a thing forward when you have deliberately left it still. Everything else, the laughing at your jokes, the sweet replies, the remembering of details, the concern when you're ill, everything else is just a good person being good near you. I know how that lands. It landed on me like a wall falling the day I finally accepted it, because it reclassified 4 years of treasure into 4 years of weather. But hear the other side of it. This rule is also the thing that sets you free, because it means you can stop decoding her. You never needed to decode her. There was never a code. She was never sending secret signals through the timing of her replies or the choice of her words. You were reading tea leaves in an empty cup, and the strain of that reading, years of it, thousands of hours of it, is a large part of what has broken you down. You get to stop now. Not because you've cracked the code at last, but because you've finally noticed there wasn't one. Here's the hard sentence at the center of this chapter, so let me just say it. You were told no in the first month. So was I. Not in words. In the oldest and clearest language there is, the language of a body that stays still and a hand that moves away. Everything after that afternoon in the hills was not courtship. It was appeal. I spent 4 years appealing a verdict that had already been delivered, gently and completely, on a hillside in the first weeks. And I called the appeal patience, and I called it respect, and I called it love, because those names let me keep filing it. And I'll tell you the question. A friend of mine, the one who eventually said the thing that cracked me open, asked me long afterward. He said, on that hill, after the 3rd time, what would she have had to do for you to hear it? And I had no answer, because the honest answer was nothing. There was no gentle behavior available to her that I would have scored as a no. Refusal-shaped kindness was hope, and silence was a test, and distance was circumstance. I had built a scoring system in which she could not lose me no matter what she did, and I called that devotion. Now from the far side I can see what a scoring system like that actually is. It is a trap you set for yourself, with her name painted on it. She never asked to be the bait, and she never even knew. One more thing about her friend, the one I filed under furniture. Years later I understood that the friend's presence on that walk was the second no of the day, delivered before we ever started climbing. And I understood something else, which shamed me and then, strangely, steadied me. This girl had systems. She had a whole quiet architecture for managing men who wanted more than she did. The friend, the gentleness, the warmth that never moved. Not because she was a schemer, but because she had needed one, because being a young woman who is pleasant to talk to means running that architecture every week of your life. I was not her first overreader. I was a Tuesday. There is a strange mercy in that, if you can take it. The thing that flattened you was, from the other side, routine. So the verdict was in by the end of the first month. What does a man do with a verdict he refuses to read? He leaves the country, and he starts writing. And so began the longest and strangest chapter of my life. The 2 years I lived inside a telephone, feeding on intervals. And if you have ever measured your day by whether one name had appeared on a screen, then you already know the country I'm about to describe. I kept the statistics without ever writing them down. 4,000 checks. Let me show you what that actually did to me. Chapter 3. 4,000 checks. I left the country a few weeks after that walk for a long posting abroad that should have been the making of me. And from the outside, the next 2 years looked like a correspondence. From the inside, they were an addiction with stationery. Let me describe a day, not a special day, an ordinary one, which is exactly the point. I wake up, and before my feet touch the floor, before I know what city I'm in, my thumb has already opened the phone and gone to one conversation. Not to email, where my actual life is happening. To one thread, with one name. If she has written overnight, the day has a golden floor under it, and I am generous and productive and funny with my colleagues, and none of them know why. If she hasn't, the day is provisional. Pleasant things bounce off it, and a piece of my attention stands at the window all day like a dog waiting for a car in the driveway. I check at breakfast. I check between meetings. I check in the bathroom during meetings, which is a detail I would rather not tell you, except that you may have checked in a bathroom during something that mattered too, and I want you to know I know. I check after sending anything to her, on a decaying schedule, 2 minutes, 5:15. And I check with a special flavor of checking that you will recognize, the kind where you already know there's nothing, because the phone would have buzzed, but you look anyway, because looking is the only lever you have, and a man with one lever pulls it. Some months, I check that thread more than 50 times a day. Across 2 years, the honest number is somewhere in the tens of thousands. Call it 4,000 checks for every one time she wrote first. And here's what I have to make you see. The checking was not a side effect of the love. The checking was the love, by which I mean it was the actual daily substance of the thing I was calling love. Strip away the story, and what was my devotion, physically, as behavior? It was a man looking at a screen, again and again and again. That was the thing itself. Everything else was commentary. Now let me show you what it was costing, because I kept no books at the time. Obsession is embezzlement. It moves small amounts continuously out of every account you have, and because no single withdrawal is dramatic, you never notice the till is empty until something big bounces. It took my work. Not spectacularly. I didn't collapse. I just went quietly from excellent to adequate. There was a project that year that needed the best of my concentration, the kind of deep, continuous attention that had built my whole reputation, and I gave it a divided mind, and it came out ordinary, and only I knew the difference. And one other man, much later. My oldest friend called me, month after month, that autumn. I answered in half sentences, distracted, fine, everything's fine. And a year on, he said to me, in a voice I'd never heard him use in 20 years of friendship, I asked you about your work in the summer. You said, it's fine. It's November. And I just found out from someone else what happened to you in between. Why do I know more about your life from strangers? That's what the checking took. Not just hours, it took the presence out from under my actual life. I attended my own best days at about 40%. When a professional triumph finally landed, the kind of thing I had worked a decade for, I felt almost nothing for 15 hours, because she hadn't written that day. And then at midnight, she sent me 2 warm sentences about it, and the whole day lit up retroactively, like a bill being paid. Think about what that means. 11 colleagues, my own mother, the achievement of my career. None of it could make the day real. One instrument, thousands of kilometers away, held the power to certify my life. If it did not register an event, the event had not occurred. If you have felt that the achievement that doesn't land because she hasn't seen it, then you know the exact weight I'm describing, and I need you to hear the conclusion I fled from for 2 years. That is not love. That is a dependency with a romantic paint job. Love adds to your life. This subtracts everything and then sells you back moments of relief at interest. And the intervals. Let me talk about the intervals, because this was my special madness and I suspect it is yours. She would take hours to reply, sometimes days, and I turned the gaps into an object of study. Without ever opening a notebook, I knew her medians, quicker in winter, slower around her exams, that a 1-day gap meant nothing but a 3-day gap had begun by hour 60 to mean everything. I generated theories the way a wound generates heat. She's busy, she's annoyed, her family, her phone, someone else. And when the reply finally came, it would arrive with some utterly ordinary explanation. Her phone had been broken, she'd been traveling, and the relief would come down on me like rain on a drought country. And here is the sickest part. The relief felt like proof. The size of my relief seemed to demonstrate the size of the love. It demonstrated nothing of the kind. It demonstrated the size of the withdrawal symptoms. A man in the grip of that cycle would feel the same flood of relief about anyone who had the keys to his nervous system. The relief isn't information about her. It's information about the cage. Here's the sentence I eventually had to write down and look at, and I'd rather give it to you now than let you spend 2 more years earning it. The length of time a person takes to reply to you contains no information about you at all. None. Her intervals were made of bus schedules and family dinners and low batteries and 100 small human frictions in a life you were not part of. I built astrology out of them. I took the random noise of a stranger's Tuesday and read my fate in it daily for 2 years, and I was a man whose actual profession was telling signal from noise. The obsession does not care what you're good at. It will take your best faculty and run its engine on it. One evening near the end of the 2nd year, I did something involuntary and terrible. I counted, just once, roughly, on my fingers in the calendar, the messages I had sent against the messages she had sent. It was about 3 to 1, and worsening. I sat with that number for perhaps a minute. Then the defense lawyer stood up in me. She's younger, she's busy. Women don't write first where I come from, and I let him talk, and I never ran the count again. A man who checks a result once, dislikes it, and never checks again. You know what that man is? That man is not deceived. He is choosing. I knew. Underneath everything, at every point, some quiet floor of me knew, and I want to say the same to you, gently, as a brother. You know too. You have known for a long time. The work we're doing here isn't discovery, it's admission. So that was the daily machinery, the checks, the intervals, the relief. But machinery has a design, and this machine was built to a very old and very well documented pattern, one that casinos discovered long before you or I ever loved anyone. In the next chapter, I'm going to open the machine and show you the mechanism, and I'm going to show you the moment I finally understood what my devotion actually was, and what she actually was, to the machine. It's the ugliest sentence in this book. It's also the one that started to set me free. Chapter 4. The Machine and the Coin. There is a famous series of experiments, you may have heard of them, where scientists put animals in a box with a lever that dispensed food. When the lever paid out every time, the animals pressed it when hungry and otherwise left it alone. Sensible. When the lever stopped paying at all, they pressed for a while, then quit. Also sensible. But there was a third setting, and the third setting broke them. When the lever paid out sometimes, unpredictably, on no schedule the animal could learn, the animals pressed it endlessly, past hunger, past exhaustion, past all sense. The unpredictable reward turned out to be the most addictive force the researchers could construct. Not the biggest reward, the most unpredictable one. Casinos are built on this. Slot machines pay on exactly that third setting, and they are calibrated by some of the best-funded psychologists on Earth, and they empty grown men's bank accounts through a lever and a light. Now think about a woman who replies warmly, sometimes, who is delightful, at intervals you cannot predict, whose attention arrives like a jackpot after 3 days of nothing, worth more for the drought that preceded it. I am not saying she designed this. Hold that thought, because she designed nothing, and the difference matters enormously. I am saying that from the inside of your nervous system, a warm woman on an unpredictable schedule is indistinguishable from the most addictive machine mankind has ever engineered. You were not weak. You were plugged into the strongest current there is, and you were told it was romance. Understand what this explains. It explains why the relationship felt more intense than real relationships you'd had, because steady affection pays on the first setting, and the first setting doesn't produce euphoria, only the third setting does. It explains why her smallest crumbs outweighed other people's feasts. A kind message from her felt bigger than a promotion, because the promotion was predictable and she was a jackpot. It explains why you couldn't leave when nothing was happening, because on the third setting, nothing happening is exactly what the big win feels like it's about to interrupt. The gambler's prayer, one more pull. The lover's version, one more message, and this time, it'll turn. Now I have to give you the distinction that this whole disaster runs on. The one-eyed tattoo on the inside of every young man's eyelids. The distinction between attention and interest. Attention is what you give. Interest is what she has. They are not the same substance. They are not convertible, and there is no exchange rate. I believed, never out loud, but in the accounting basement where I kept my real books, that attention accumulates. That every message, every remembered detail, every gift, every year, was a deposit into an account with her name on it, and that one day the account would mature and be paid out in love. Listen to me. There is no account. There was never an account. Attention doesn't accumulate anywhere except in your own ledger, and she never saw the ledger, and if she had seen it, it would not have moved her. It would have frightened her. 4 years of secret deposits toward a payout she never agreed to. When I finally presented the balance, at the very end, expecting settlement, that's when she said the sentence about not being an option, and we'll get there. What she was actually looking at in that moment was a bill for services she never ordered. Nobody signed your ledger. Devotion volunteered as devotion donated. Write that somewhere. Her interest, meanwhile, the actual substance I needed, was simply never there in the shape I wanted. Not hidden, not dormant, not waiting for the right unlock sequence. Just absent. The way a color is absent from a room. And all my attention could not summon it, because attention is not a summons. At full strength, attention without interest doesn't read as love to the person receiving it. It reads as weather. And at overwhelming strength, it reads as pressure. A thing to be managed. I thought I was building a bridge to her, plank by plank, year by year. From her side, There was no bridge. There was a man, far away, being sometimes interesting and sometimes a lot, and she was being kind about it on the third setting without ever once knowing there was a machine, which brings me to the sentence. The ugliest one in the book. I told you it was coming. It was near the end, during the year of the worst of it, and I was walking home at night rehearsing, as I always was by then, the next message, the next move in a game only I was playing. And a thought arrived that was not in my voice, the way the true ones sometimes aren't. It said, "This stopped being about her a long time ago. It's a machine you feed, and she's the coin." I stopped walking. Because it was true, and I knew it instantly, the way you know your own name. Somewhere in the 4 years, the woman, the actual, particular living woman, with her exams and her family and her own hopes that had nothing to do with me, had ceased to be the point. The machine was the point. The cycle of check and wait and theorize and spike and relief had become self-sustaining, an economy of its own, and it needed her only as an input. It needed her name on the screen the way an engine needs fuel, impersonally. If I'm honest, with the full lights on. The machine didn't even prefer her good news. A warm reply and a worrying silence both fed it equally well. Both gave it something to process. I had built around the most idealized person in my life, a device that ran on her and was indifferent to her. That is what my 4 years of devotion were at the end. Not love for a woman, maintenance of a machine, with the woman as the coin I fed it. I promised you this book wouldn't call you a fool, and I keep that promise here, at the hardest point. You are not a fool, and you are also not, whatever the sharper voices in your head say at 3 in the morning, a predator or a creep. You are a man whose loneliness built a machine out of the best materials it could find. Your intelligence, your loyalty, your capacity for devotion, all real virtues, all load-bearing in the structure that trapped you. That's the tragedy of this condition. It is built out of your good parts. But a machine made of virtues is still a machine, and here is the mercy hidden in that ugly sentence. The reason it started to free me. If it's a machine, it can be starved. You cannot argue with love. You cannot reason with destiny. You cannot negotiate with a soulmate story. But a machine is just a loop that needs fuel, and fuel can be cut. The checking, the theorizing, the rereading, every one of those is a feeding. Stop the feedings and the machine does what all machines do without fuel. It slows, it cools, it stops. I know this because mine stopped. This book is being written from the far side of the silence where it used to run. But before it stopped, it had one more act in it. Because I came home from abroad after 2 years. Home to the same city as her at last, with 2 years of imaginary momentum behind me, and a suitcase full of gifts. What happened next is the part of the story where I finally forced the question out of the greenhouse and into the air. It did not survive the weather. Let me tell you about the gifts and the 40 minutes and what my generosity actually was. Chapter 5. The gifts she didn't ask for. I came home after 2 years abroad with a suitcase that was heavier than it needed to be, and it was heavier because of her. I had bought the gifts slowly, over months, the way a man builds a case. Nothing scandalous. I was always careful to keep everything defensible, and I'll ask you to hold that word for later, because defensible turns out to be one of the great confessions of my life. Things from the places I'd worked. Things chosen to show how well I knew her, that I remembered the offhand things she said about a color, a writer, a kind of tea, each one selected with a jeweler's care by a man who had, At that point, spent perhaps 10 hours in this woman's physical presence across his entire life. Say that number out loud in your own case. Count the actual hours you have spent in the same room as her. Not the messages, not the years, the hours, breathing the same air. I have asked a number of ruined men this question, and the answer is almost always some version of mine. A life's savings of feeling, invested across an afternoon's worth of actual contact. She agreed to meet me. I should tell you the truth about even that sentence. She agreed the way she did everything, with warmth and a qualifier, a limited window, a public place, and though I didn't clock it at the time, an exit built in from the start. I spent days preparing for that meeting. I planned the conversation like a summit. And she came, and she was lovely, and my jokes landed. And for about half an hour, it was everything the greenhouse had promised. She stayed 40 minutes. She accepted the gifts with a graciousness that I replayed for months. Real pleasure, real thanks, the right amount of protest that it was too much. And then she looked at the time, and there was somewhere she had to be, and she left, and I sat there with the empty teacups and told myself it had gone perfectly. It had, in fact, gone perfectly, as a kindness from her to me. A young woman gave a man 40 minutes of warmth to receive a gesture she could not refuse without cruelty, and then she returned to her actual life. That is what happened. What I recorded instead was, reconnection established, gifts landed, next meeting soon. There was no next meeting. Every invitation after that, and I paced them carefully, always careful, always defensible, met the same weather. Warm, apologetic, specific reasons, no counteroffer. That last detail is the one that matters, and I'll give it to you as a tool. When a person wants to see you but can't on Tuesday, they say, "What about Thursday?" The counteroffer is the interest. The apology is just the manners. I collected a year of beautifully mannered apologies with no Thursdays in them, and filed every one as bad luck. Now, the gifts. Let me open them up properly, because I told you generosity was going to turn out to be something else. A gift with no expectation attached is a lovely thing. Give them all your life. But my gifts had expectations soldered to them, and I knew it, because I felt the specific injury when the expectations didn't pay. Real generosity doesn't file grievances. Mine did, quietly at first, and then not quietly at all. Some months after the 40 minutes, on an evening when yet another invitation had died its polite death, I caught myself in a sentence, the ugly inner kind that never quite makes it to words. After everything I've done, after the years, the loyalty, the gifts, the attention, the ledger again, you see, the account from the last chapter, and now it had matured into its final form, which is entitlement. I had converted my volunteer devotion into her debt. And entitlement's twin brother arrived on schedule, resentment. The very same qualities I'd worshipped. Her composure, her gentle unavailability, began, in certain lights, to look like coldness, like games, like cruelty. Some nights I loved her like scripture, and some nights, briefly and horribly, I hated her. And if you have felt that whiplash, that flip between worship and fury about the same unchanged person, then mark it well, because that flip is the signature of the machine. Love doesn't flip like that. Accounts do. A person you love can disappoint you. Only a person who owes you can defraud you, and she owed me nothing. And so the fraud was, from the first entry, Imaginary. Here's where I did the things I am least proud of. Nothing dramatic. My sins were all small, digital, and deniable, which somehow makes them worse in the remembering. I deleted her. That was meant to be an amputation, and it lasted 11 days, and I told myself the re-add was casual, though I had rehearsed its casualness like a stage line. Then I deleted her again, this time making sure in the small, pathetic ways available that the deletion was visible, because by then the deletions weren't amputations at all, were they? They were messages, fire alarms pulled by a man who wanted to be asked why he was leaving. She never asked. And after some rounds of this, the withdrawals and returns of a man circling something he can neither have nor leave, she did the single sanest thing anyone did in the entire story. She blocked me. No announcement. No explanation. One day the door was simply gone from the wall. And I want to tell you exactly what I did with that, because it's the purest specimen in this whole museum. Within 48 hours I had reframed her block as evidence of feeling. She wouldn't need to block me if I meant nothing to her, I reasoned. Indifference doesn't build walls. Somewhere in this block, I told myself, there is heat. No. Let me stand in front of that one and say it plainly, because some version of it is circulating in you about something she did. A block is not passion. A block is facility management. She was a young woman with limited hours and a man on her phone who appeared and vanished and reappeared, whose weather she could no longer predict, and she closed the window because the room kept getting cold. It was not a message about my significance. It was the removal of my access, which are opposite things, and the day you can tell them apart is a day of real progress. The block held for more than a year. It was, though neither of us would have said it this way, the most honest communication we ever had. Everything I needed to know was in it. I studied it for heat instead. And I need to say one thing straight at you, brother, here, because this may be the chapter where you and I part ways on the facts. Your version of the deletions may be worse than mine. It may be the messages you sent in the resentful hour, the cold ones, the accusing ones, the ones engineered to sting her into responding. If they're there, in your history, and you flinch when you think of them, good. Flinching is the right response, and it is survivable, and we will deal with the shame of all of it properly in a later chapter, not by rationalizing it, but by paying it and closing it. For now, just this. The man who sent those was in withdrawal. Withdrawal is not an excuse. It is, however, a diagnosis, and diagnoses end differently than verdicts. Verdicts you serve, diagnoses you treat. So there I was, blocked, a year and more of silence, the machine running on fumes and memory. And then one day, and every man with this story has this day, the door reappeared in the wall, her account back, visible to me again, like a light coming on in a window across a valley. I read it as a message. I read it as the turn in the film. It was almost certainly a nothing, a settings change, a new phone, an automatic migration, some housekeeping act as impersonal as weather. But by then, I had one conversation left in me, the big one, the one I'd been drafting for 4 years. And I spin it. The next 2 chapters are that conversation and what it did to me. And in it, at last, you'll hear her actual voice and the sentence you and I have in common. The one about being serious. Chapter 6. The Question. The last conversation began like the first one, with me finding a reason. Her account had reappeared, and I waited a decent interval. I was always waiting decent intervals. My whole strategy for 4 years was decent intervals. And then I wrote something light, and she replied, warmly, as if the block had never happened, which, in her accounting, it more or less hadn't. It had been a piece of housekeeping, long finished, not worth mentioning. She never did mention it. Neither did I. 2 people politely stepping around a year-long silence as if it were furniture. And then we had the best conversation of our entire acquaintance. I want to be fair to that conversation, because it was genuinely good, and its goodness is what made it lethal. She was older now, living abroad, studying. She told me about her life there, the flat, the cooking she'd had to learn, the shopping alone, and a language she was still assembling. My jokes landed. She told me I was funny. There is no drug on this earth like being told you're funny by the one person your whole nervous system is tuned to. She told me about a distinction she'd won in her studies, and I felt a pride so violent and so proprietary it should have frightened me, and threaded through it that old voice. A woman like this is worth every one of those 4 years. The machine, you see, praising its own fuel. And then the conversation turned, and she began to ask me things. Why hadn't I married? She was surprised. Someone like me, she said, and I am quoting the shape of it exactly, that she could find someone for me. She asked whether I'd want to settle abroad or at home, and I said something non-committal, and she said, well, it depends on the girl. It would be the girl's choice. You'd have to ask her. Now, brother, stand here with me a moment, in the middle of that conversation, because this is the exact spot where my 4 years detonated, and I need to walk you through the wreckage slowly. Every one of those lines has 2 readings. Hear them both. A woman who is interested in you might indeed ask why you haven't married, might muse about the future, might say, it depends on the girl, you'd have to ask her, with her eyes down, meaning, ask me. That reading exists. I know it exists because I took it. And a woman who is fond of you, comfortable now that distance and time have made things safe, might ask why a good man like you hasn't married because she genuinely wonders, might offer to find someone for you because in our part of the world that is what fondness does, it matchmakes, might say, it depends on the girl, you'd have to ask her, as a piece of cheerful, generic wisdom about how marriage decisions work, with no eyes down anywhere, thinking, if she is thinking of anyone at all, of a friend of hers. An actual specific friend, whom I later came to understand. 2 readings. The words carry both, without straining. And here is the sentence I want you to keep from this chapter, the one that took me years to be able to say. The fact that your reading was possible never made it right, and hers needed no decoding at all. There was an ordinary meaning sitting in plain sight, a kind young woman offering to matchmake for an older friend she respects, and I stepped over it, as I had stepped over every plain meaning for 4 years to reach the hidden one, because I had 4 years invested in there being a hidden one. A man with my ledger could not afford the plain meaning. So the pronoun did the killing. She said her, meaning a girl she'd introduced me to, and I heard her, meaning herself, and on that single syllable's misreading, I put my whole weight, and I asked. I won't stage the exact words for you. What matters is that I finally, after 4 years, made it explicit, that I wanted her, that the settling down, the girl, the future, I meant it all about her. In my head, even then, even at the end, I had dressed it with a joke. I built the sentence with a laugh stitched into it, so that if it went wrong, I could claim it had been half a joke. 4 years, and my one honest moment came out wearing armor. Mark that, because it's the doorway to the next chapter. I had engineered even my confession to be deniable, so that a refusal wouldn't officially count. She was silent for a while, longer than any interval I had ever logged, and then she said it. The sentence you and I share, and whatever wording yours came. She said she didn't answer men who weren't serious, that she was not an option, to be circled for years and picked up when convenient, that if a man were serious, he would have been serious, openly, properly, in a form her life could actually receive, and not this, whatever this had been. I remember the physical sensation of reading it. Cold first, then a rushing sound, then a kind of total system objection, every part of me rising up with the same word, unjust. Not serious, not serious. I had been nothing but serious. 4 years of seriousness. She had it exactly, perfectly, precisely backwards. She had taken the most devoted man in her orbit and accused him of the one crime he was innocent of. And now, from the far side, let me tell you what I could not see that night. She was right, not right about my feelings. My feelings were a furnace, and if seriousness were measured in private suffering, I'd have been the most serious man alive. But she couldn't see my feelings. Nobody can see feelings. People see conduct. That's all anyone ever gets to see. And now run my conduct through her eyes, cold, the way an auditor would. A man appears in her first weeks in the city, warm, impressive, attentive. He never states an intention. Not that day, not that year, not ever. He writes for years from abroad, always pleasant, never declaring. He returns. He gives gifts too significant to be casual, while saying nothing that would make them mean anything. He invites and invites, but never asks. He vanishes from her contacts and reappears. Vanishes and reappears. Is blocked, waits, returns, jokes. For 4 years, at every single fork where a serious man would have stood up and said, "This is what I want, and I accept that you may say no," he chose the deniable path. He kept himself, permanently, in a position where no refusal could ever officially land on him. In her language, in the language of conduct, which is the only language anyone can actually read. What does that spell? It spells, not serious. It spells, a man keeping me warm as an option while his real decisions happen elsewhere. Her reading of me was wrong about my heart and dead right about my behavior, and she only ever had access to my behavior. The great bitter joke of my 4 years is that my armor worked. I built a costume that made my devotion invisible and my refusals impossible, and it functioned perfectly, and then I stood there devastated that she couldn't see through it. She wasn't cruel that night. She was accurate about everything she could see. The injustice I choked on was real, but the person who had hidden the evidence, the person who had made sure my seriousness could never be entered into the record, was me. You know what I did next, because you did it too. I did not sit with her sentence. I did not, even for 1 hour, consider that it might be information. I opened the drafts folder of my soul and began composing the appeal, because if she thought I wasn't serious, then she had simply misunderstood, and misunderstandings can be corrected, and I was so very good at explaining things. The next chapter is about that appeal, about the question I asked her. Why would you think that? And the drafts I wrote, and the answer I actually got, and why the whole enterprise of demanding to be understood was the last and purest form of the disease. It's your chapter, brother. You've been living in it. Let's go in and turn the lights on. Chapter 7. Why would you think that? The night she said it, the not serious sentence, I wrote her 3 replies. The first draft was the wounded one. I don't know why you'd feel that way. Long, aggrieved, itemized. It laid out the years like exhibits. the messages, the gifts, the waiting. It was a legal brief with a broken heart, and its every line said the same thing underneath. You are wrong about me, and I have receipts. The second draft was the apology, the abject one, where I took all blame for everything in the hope that total surrender would reopen the door. It groveled. Reading it back even that night, some sliver of me was embarrassed for the man who wrote it. The third draft was the engineered casual one, the worst of the three. Breezy, unbothered, a little cool, designed to signal that her refusal had barely landed, written by a man who had been pacing his flat for 3 hours. Armor again, right to the end. And then, because the drafts were all terrible and I knew it, I sent the fourth thing, the short thing, the actual question, the one you asked too, in whatever words you used. Why would you think I wasn't serious? I want to spend this whole chapter inside that question because it feels like the most reasonable question in the world. It feels like a simple request for information, and it is one of the most disguised objects in the whole territory. Almost nothing about it is what it appears to be. Let me show you what you are actually asking, because until you see it, you will keep asking it. If not of her, then of the ceiling at 4 a.m, for years. First, it is not a question. It's an appeal. You are not gathering information. You are contesting a verdict. When she said, "You aren't serious," she was not opening a seminar on your inner life and inviting papers. She was announcing a conclusion, one she had reached slowly, over years, on abundant evidence, in the privacy where real conclusions are reached. Your why pretends to be curiosity, but its actual function is procedural. It refuses the verdict and demands the case be reheard, with you, this time, present for the deliberations. Listen to the question again with the costume off. Justify your refusal of me to me, so that I can rebut it. Would you answer that summons from anyone about anything you'd already decided? Second, it asks her to do labor that was never hers. To answer honestly. To actually walk you through why she read you as not serious. She would have to sit down and compose an essay on 4 years of your behavior, delivered to a man she has just refused, a man whose reaction she cannot predict, a man whose history includes vanishing and reappearing when wounded. That essay would cost her hours of careful, dangerous, unpaid emotional work, and its best possible outcome for her is that you argue with it. That is the deal your simple question offered her. She declined it, or answered in 2 lines, or went quiet, and that wasn't coldness. That was a sane person declining an unpayable invoice. Third, and this is the piece that finally cracked it open for me, the question demands a service that does not exist, being fully understood on your own terms by the person who refused you. Sit with this one, brother. Because underneath everything, under the love and the grief and the anger, I have come to believe this is the deepest hunger in the whole condition. More than we wanted her, we wanted to be seen accurately, completely, in our best light by the one witness whose account we had decided mattered. Her refusal was survivable. What felt unsurvivable was her version of us. She walked away carrying a portrait in which I was a man who wasn't serious, who treated her as an option. A portrait I found monstrous, unrecognizable, and every cell in me screamed to chase her down and correct it. Not to win her, just to make her carry an accurate portrait instead. And here is the stone truth, the one this book has been walking toward from the first page, so let me set it down carefully. You do not get to be understood. Not by her. Not on this. Understanding is not a debt she owes. It is not a human right you can appeal to. It is a gift that people give from within their own limits, and she has given what she is going to give. She will go through the rest of her life believing you are not serious. She will tell the story that way if she ever tells it at all. Most likely she will simply not tell it, because, and this is its own medicine, you occupy a far smaller room in her memory than she occupies in yours. The portrait will never be corrected. The record, as she holds it, will stand wrong about your heart, right about your conduct, forever. I know what that sentence does. When I finally stopped fighting it, and I fought it for a year, it hurt more than the original. No, the no took her from me. This took my character witness. But on the far side of accepting it, I found the thing I can now hand to you. The need to be understood by her was the last tentacle of the machine. Think about it. Chasing her love kept me attached. When the love became impossible, chasing her understanding kept me attached. Same wire, new insulation. As long as there was a version of me in her head that needed correcting, I had a reason to compose messages, monitor, wait, hope, return. I just want her to understand was the machine's final product, the one it sells to men too proud to keep saying, I want her back. It kept me plugged in for another year. The day you genuinely no longer require her to hold an accurate picture of you, that day, and not before, the wire is actually cut. And there's a strange dignity waiting on the other side of that cut, which I did not expect, so let me report it. Being misunderstood and bearing it silently, without campaigning, it turns out to be one of the more adult experiences available to a man. Every substantial life eventually requires it. Somewhere out there, people hold wrong versions of you, of your motives at that job, your role in that family quarrel, your seriousness about that woman, and the mark of a grown man is not that he corrects every record. It's that he can leave a record wrong when correcting it would cost more than it pays, and walk on, whole, unaccompanied by his own press office. She believes what she believes. You know what you know. Those two facts can coexist on the same planet without a trial. Nothing needs to happen. That nothing needs to happen. When it finally lands, it lands like an unlocking. For the record, here is how the actual exchange ended. My version of it. To my, why would you think that? She replied briefly. Kind, general, final, the diplomatic form of, this is not a conversation we are going to have. And then, later, after my last short message, and I'll tell you about that last message near the end of this book, because by some grace I got that one thing right. She sent 2 words, a thank you, in effect, perfectly kind, perfectly closed, the last thing she ever said to me. I have not heard her voice since, and the striking thing, the thing I could never have believed that night, is that this is now fine. Not numb fine, actually fine, weather fine. But between that night and this fine, there was a valley, and I have to take you through it honestly, because you are in it now. The refusal and the lost appeal knocked the last props out, and what follows has a clinical name and a real weight and some genuinely dangerous corners, and men lie to themselves about it more than they lie about anything. The next chapter is about the dark itself, what it's made of, how long it actually lasts, which parts of it a book like this can carry, and the exact point at which it needs more than a book. We go there next, and we go carefully. Chapter 8. The Dark That Follows. Let me describe the months after the end. And I'm going to describe them without flinching, because you may be inside them now. And a man inside them needs one thing before he needs advice. He needs to hear someone name the country accurately, so he knows he's not the only one who's ever been stationed there. The first thing that happens is that the world goes flat. Not sad. Sad would be something flat. Food tastes like its own packaging. Work that used to absorb you now slides off. You laugh at the right moments, because the machinery of politeness still runs, but the laugh comes off a shelf. Sleep goes strange in one of two directions. Either it won't come, and you lie there running the courtroom. Her lines, your lines, the drafts, the exhibits, or it comes in vast gray slabs, 10 hours, 12, and you wake unrested, because what you're doing at that point isn't sleeping, it's hiding. The mornings are the worst, and nobody warns you about that. There's a half second after waking, before the facts load, when you're just a man in a bed. Then the file opens. Her, the sentence, the whole finished shape of it, and the weight comes down on your sternum like a dropped beam every single morning on schedule for months. If you know that half second and what follows it, I'm sorry. I know it too. And your mind lies to you in a particular direction. It tells you this is permanent, that you had one slot for this and she filled it, and now the slot is scar tissue. It tells you the 4 years were your best remaining ones, and you spent them, so the account is empty. It tells you, in the small hours, that men like you get exactly one genuine feeling per lifetime, and yours is used. I want to be a witness against that voice, formally, for the record. It said all of that to me too, with total conviction, and every single claim was false. Not approximately false. Completely false. But I could not have believed that from inside, which is why I'm saying it from outside, from the far bank. In writing, the voice of that country lies about the geography of that country. It is the one witness you must never trust on the subject of your future. Now let me tell you what this dark is actually made of, because it has layers, and they need different medicine. The first layer is withdrawal, the literal kind. For years, your brain's chemistry ran on a drip feed of anticipation and relief administered by one name on a screen. That drip has stopped. What you feel in the first weeks, the agitation, the compulsion to check, the phantom buzzes, the inability to sit still inside your own evening, that is not the size of your love. It is the size of the dependency, doing exactly what dependencies do when the supply stops. It passes the way withdrawal passes, miserably, physically, and then genuinely, weeks, not years. Every day you don't feed it is a day of actual healing, even though, and mark this, the healing days feel worse than the feeding days for a while. That's the trap that sends men back. Don't mistake the ache of recovery for a signal to resume the drug. The second layer is grief, and it's real grief, and here you have to fight for your own legitimacy, because the world will not grant it. There's no category for what you lost. Men who lose wives get casseroles. Men who lose girlfriends get sympathy. You lost a woman you never had, and for that there is no card, no leave from work, and no patience. You were never even together, as if the accounting of the heart ran on paperwork. Let me grant you what the world won't. You are grieving something that was real. Not the relationship, there wasn't one, but the future you built and furnished and lived in for years. The imagined mornings. The imagined introduction to your mother. The imagined old age. You lived in that house, brother. Its rooms were more real to you than your actual rooms. And it has been demolished, not damaged, demolished. And grief for a demolished future is real grief, and it runs the same course as any grief. It comes in waves, the waves slowly space out, and one day, without announcement, a wave fails to arrive on schedule. Grief needs no fixing. It needs witnessing and time, and it ends on its own clock. Provided, and this is the one condition, you stop rebuilding the house between waves. The third layer is the identity collapse, and this one is underrated. For 4 years, The Man Who Loves Her was your job title. It organized your days. The check-in gave every hour a purpose. It explained your solitude. You weren't lonely. You were faithful. It made you the protagonist of a story with suspense in it. And now the position has been eliminated, and you're discovering that you gave the machine so many of your hours that other departments of you, the friend, the professional, the brother, the man with interests, have been running on skeleton staff for years. A big part of what feels like heartbreak is actually this: unemployment of the soul. You don't just miss her. You miss having a purpose you never had to question. That layer doesn't heal with time alone. It heals with replacement. And the later chapters are about exactly that. Now the serious paragraph. I'd be failing you if I skipped it. For most men, this valley, walked honestly, passes. Weeks of acute withdrawal, months of waves, then air. But there is a version of it that is not the ordinary passage, and it has markers. If the flatness has gone on for many weeks with no light at all, if sleep and appetite have been broken for a long stretch, if you've stopped washing, stopped answering, stopped leaving the flat, if alcohol or anything else has quietly moved from evening guest to daily staff, and above all, above everything, if the thought has come in any of its costumes that the people around you might be better off without you, or that not being here would be simpler, then this is no longer a book's job, and I am not going to pretend my voice on a recording can carry it. That is a doctor's job, and going to one is not the weak move. It is the same move you'd make for a broken hand, made for the organ that runs everything else. And the men I most respect on this earth include several who made exactly that appointment from exactly this valley. One phone call, this week, to a doctor or to whatever crisis line serves the place you live. If that paragraph is you, put this book down and make the call first. The book will wait. I want you here for the rest of it, and I want you here, full stop. For the rest of the valley, the ordinary, painful, passable valley, here is the one instruction that matters, and it sounds too small to work. Keep the machinery of your life running, even though it feels pointless. Wash. Eat something real. Walk outside once a day. Not for wellness, just for witnesses. The shopkeeper, the neighbor, the man at the gym. Low-stakes human contact is structural at this stage. Go to work and do a mediocre job if that's what you have. Mediocre attendance beats brilliant absence. You are not trying to feel better yet. Feeling better is not available yet, and chasing it too early is how men end up in worse rooms. You are trying to keep the roads open for the day the supplies start moving again. They start sooner than the voice says. They started, for me, at about month 3, with something as stupid as actually tasting a meal and noticing I'd tasted it. There is one more piece of the dark I haven't touched, and it's the piece most men can't say out loud, so I'll say it for both of us. The version of her you're grieving was mostly built by you, and some part of you has begun to suspect that, and the suspicion feels like a betrayal of the love, so you keep pushing it down. Stop pushing it down. That suspicion is not the betrayal of the story. It's the door out of it. In the next chapter, I'm going to open that door all the way. We're going to look at the whole 4 years from her side of the glass, the side where a young woman was clear and patient and blameless in the main, and was simply never heard. It's the chapter I most needed and most resisted. Come and stand where she stood. It changes everything after. Chapter 9. She was clear. There's an exercise I did about a year after the end, at the suggestion of the friend who'd stayed, the one from the November phone call. He listened to my whole version one night, all of it, the full 4-year testimony, and at the end he was quiet for a while, and then he said, "Now tell it again, but you're not allowed to say what you felt or what you meant. Only what each of you did. Conduct only. Like a report. I thought it would take an hour. It took 10 minutes. That was the first shock. How short the story is when you strip out the inner weather. And the second shock was what the report said. I'm going to do the exercise here in front of you with my story, and then you are going to owe me the same exercise with yours. Report begins. A man in his mid-30s approaches a young woman newly arrived in the city, in a market. She is polite. He obtains her number. He invites her out. She comes and brings a friend. On a walk, he reaches for her hand 3 times. 3 times she moves it away, gently, and continues being pleasant. He does not ask her anything. She does not offer anything. He leaves the country. He writes to her, frequently, for 2 years. She replies warmly, at roughly 1/3 his rate, initiating rarely. She never asks him to write more, and never asks him to stop. He returns with gifts. She meets him once, for 40 minutes, in a public place, thanks him graciously, and leaves early. He extends further invitations. She declines each one with an excuse and never proposes an alternative. He deletes her from his contacts, restores her, deletes her again. She blocks him. The block stands for over a year. Her account becomes visible again. He initiates. She responds warmly. In the course of a good conversation, she offers to introduce him to a suitable girl. He then, for the first time in 4 years, declares romantic intent, packaged in a joke. She refuses, and states that she does not answer men who are not serious or who treat her as an option. He asks her to justify the refusal. She declines, kindly and briefly. He sends a short, courteous farewell. She thanks him. Contact ends. Report ends. Read that report as a stranger. Now answer the question I had to answer in my friend's kitchen. Where, in that report, is her ambiguity? It isn't there. It was never there. In the report, in the world of things that actually happened, she is a model of consistency. Every single action she took, from the first afternoon to the final thank you, points in exactly one direction, without one exception. Not one. I challenged myself to find a single act of hers, an act, not a warmth, not a phrasing, not an interval, that a neutral observer would score as romantic movement toward me. 4 years of material, the count is 0. The mixed signals, that phrase men like us hold like a deed, were never signals from her. They were mixtures made in me. She emitted warmth, which is character, on a background of unavailability, which was her actual answer. I mixed those in my own bowl and called the result her ambiguity. Brother, hear this properly, because it's the load-bearing sentence of the chapter. She was not a confusing woman. She was a clear woman, being read by a man who could not afford her clarity. There's a world of difference, and the difference decides where the work is. A confusing woman needs decoding. A clear woman, unheard, needs nothing from you. The repair is entirely on your side of the glass. Now come stand on her side. I warn you it's uncomfortable, and I'll ask you to do it without self-flagellation. We're here for accuracy, not for a whipping. Be her for a minute. You are 20, 21, new to a city, building the first independent chapter of your life. Studies, friendships, a future you're assembling with both hands. An older man appears. He is accomplished and courteous, and honestly, talking with him is interesting. He takes your mind seriously, which not everyone does. but he wants something. Women can feel wanting the way you can feel weather, long before it's declared, and it is never declared, which means it can never be addressed. You can't refuse a man who hasn't asked. There is no social move available for, I decline the thing you haven't said. So you do what women everywhere have always done with an undeclared wanting attached to a man you don't wish to wound. You stay kind, you stay slightly out of reach, and you hope he hears the shape of it. You bring the friend, you move your hand, gently, 3 times, and keep the afternoon pleasant, and trust that 3 is enough for anyone. You answer his letters. He's far away, and the letters are often genuinely good, and warmth costs you little across 4,000 kilometers. Then he's back, and there are gifts that are too much, and you receive them with as much grace as you can assemble, and you leave early, and you decline the invitations one by one, gently, always gently, because gentleness has been your whole policy. And this man, this intelligent, accomplished man, will not hear gentle. It begins to frighten you a little. Not because he's threatening, but because he's unreachable. Nothing you do registers. He vanishes from your contacts, which stings and confuses, returns, vanishes again. And now there's something volatile in the pattern, something that reappears when wounded, and you're a young woman managing this alone, unpaid, on top of your actual life. So you close the one door you control. A year later, he's back at the reopened window being funny, and you're older now and it's manageable, and you even try, in the warmest way you know, to redirect the whole thing towards something possible. You offer to find him someone, you all but hold up a sign saying, "This is the shape my care for you can take," and he responds by finally saying the thing, 4 years too late, wrapped in a joke, and when you say the truest sentence you know, that this was never how a serious man treats a woman he wants, he demands an explanation. Of you, after all of it. That was her 4 years. While you were starring in a tragic romance, she was doing shift work, managing with mostly impressive patience, a situation she never asked for, created entirely by a wanting that would not name itself. When I finally saw that, actually saw it, stood in it, the anger I'd been carrying about her coldness, her games, the block, the 2-word goodbye, all of it dropped through the floor in about a week. There was nothing left to be angry at. Every act of hers I'd catalogued as cruelty reclassified, one by one, into the same folder. A clear person, being as kind as the situation allowed, to a man who had made himself impossible to be kind to efficiently. And I'll head off the thought your machine is generating right now, because mine generated it too, on schedule. Then why didn't she just say it plainly, once, "I will never want you, stop"? 3 answers, and then we close. 1. She did say it, in the oldest language there is, with a hand, 3 times in the first month. Everything else was you appealing. 2. The plain sentence you wish she'd said is the single most socially expensive sentence a young woman can deliver to an older, respected, undeclared man. It costs her the accusation of arrogance, of imagining things, of cruelty, and she had no way of knowing you'd receive it well, and your record of vanishing when hurt argued otherwise. And 3, the one that stings and settles. For most of those 4 years, she had no idea a plain sentence was needed, because she had no idea the cathedral existed. You hid it, deniability, remember, and then held her responsible for not addressing what you hid. She was not a villain, and here's the part you must also take. She was not a prize either. Villain and prize are both objects, and both were roles in your play. She was a third thing the play never cast her as, a person who was clear and was not heard. So if the anger at her is dissolving, and I know it dissolves slowly, give it the week mine took, give it a month, then you're ready for the practical half of this book. Because insight without protocol is just a sadder way to relapse. Next chapter, we go to your phone, your screenshots, your late-night archives, the vault where the machine keeps its fuel, and we burn it down properly, in the right order, so it stays burned. Chapter 10. Burning the Vault. Every man in this condition keeps a vault. Let's inventory yours, because I kept one too, and the contents are always the same. The full message history, of course, years of it, backed up, some of it in more than one place, because losing it was unthinkable. Screenshots of the best exchanges, saved separately, the greatest hits, for faster access on bad nights. Photographs, the few real ones, plus the ones harvested from wherever her public life leaked them. Small physical relics, a receipt from the one cafe, maybe, the wrapping ribbon, a bus ticket from a hillside. And then the darker shelf, the one we don't mention, the monitoring apparatus, the profile checked daily, hers and her friends, for shadows of her, the last seen timestamps, the story views. And if your history is like mine, somewhere in there was a season of something worse, a paid feature, a second account, some small technical instrument that showed you more of her activity than she believed she was showing. Read states she thought were private, presence she thought was unobserved. I had a season of that. I'd build theories from when she'd been online, from what she'd opened, and when. And I was dimly aware the whole time that it was a violation. Dimly, the way you're aware of a smell in a house you've decided not to investigate. And I filed that awareness somewhere. I didn't have to look at it. Let's look at it now. Fair warning. This is the chapter where I'll be hardest on the both of us, and it's also the chapter with the most immediate relief on the other side, because it ends with your hands actually doing something. Here is what the monitoring actually was. I told myself it was love's hunger. I just want to know she's well. False. Run the test. Did I feel warm when I saw she was well? No. I felt nothing when the data was neutral. A spike of anguish when it suggested a fuller life without me. And a spike of something shameful and hopeful when it suggested loneliness. That's not care. Care wants the other person to flourish. This wanted evidence, and evidence in one direction. What I had built was a surveillance operation whose product was justification. Justification for hope on the good days, and for grievance on the bad ones. And underneath it sat an assumption so ugly, I could only see it after it broke. That her private behavior was data owed to me. That because I loved her, her life was my instrument panel, that I had reading rights. Brother, nobody's inner life is your instrument panel. Her read times, her online hours, her weekends. These were never yours to collect, not because a rule book says so, but because she believed herself unobserved. And taking what a person believes is unwatched is taking, full stop. The love did not license it. The love was the alibi. I'm not saying this to flog you. I'm saying it because the standard script here, it's normal, everyone checks their ex, keeps men checking for years, and the truth releases you faster. The checking was beneath you, and you knew, and the knowing is why it never once made you feel clean afterward. Not once, right? 4 years of checking, and not one check ever ended with you feeling better for more than 90 seconds. That's the tell. Nourishment satisfies. Fuel just burns. So now we burn the vault. Here is the protocol, exactly as I'd give it to a brother, in order, and the order matters. First, tonight, the monitoring dies. Every instrument, the paid features canceled, the second account deleted, the muted but watched profiles unfollowed or muted into true invisibility. Whatever combination your platforms require, so that no ordinary reflex of your thumb can reach any pane of glass with her behind it. Note what this is not. It is not blocking her. We'll talk in the next chapter about why dramatic gestures are still contact. It is removing your own access quietly, which no one will ever see or know about, which is precisely why it counts. Gestures perform. This just closes. Second, within the week, the archive. And here I'll be honest about the argument, because men always litigate this one. Keep the messages? They're my history. They're part of my life. I know. I made the speech. Here's the reply I finally couldn't beat. An archive you revisit is not a record. It's a ration. You are not preserving history. You are storing fuel, and you know it's fuel because of when you reach for it. Never at noon, always at midnight, always in the low hour, exactly like a bottle. Delete the thread. Delete the backups of the thread. Delete the screenshots folder, including the one folder inside a folder you think I don't know about. The photographs too. And the relics, the ribbon, the ticket, into the bin tonight, not ceremonially, no candles, just housekeeping. The ceremony version is secretly one more feeding. If there's something genuinely entangled, like gifts she gave you, there mostly won't be. Men in our position mostly give them away to someone who has no idea what they were. Will it hurt? It will hurt in a way I need to describe precisely, because the sensation fools men. When I deleted my archive, 4 years, thousands of messages, gone in 3 or 4 presses, my hands were actually unsteady, and what came was not relief. Relief would have been suspicious. What came was a kind of physical dropping sensation, like a lift starting down. A lurch of pure loss, and then, for some days, waves of panicked reaching, my mind grabbing for exchanges I could no longer verify, like a tongue going to a pulled tooth. This is withdrawal, arriving on schedule, and it means the treatment is working. The archive was the last physical organ of the machine. You are not erasing her. She's in your memory and stays there, softening on its own honest schedule like every memory. What you're erasing is the laboratory, the place where memory got resharpened nightly back into obsession. Memories fade. That's their mercy. The vault existed to deny them that mercy. Let them have it. Third, and this is the piece that separates the men who get out from the men who redecorate the cell, the reflex itself. Access dies tonight, the archive dies this week, but the urge to check will outlive both, because the urge lives in your nervous system, not your phone. For months your thumb will still make the motion. You'll be tired or lonely or briefly happy. Happiness is a trigger too. The machine always wanted her to certify the good news, remember, and the impulse will rise, fully formed. Just look. Nothing to look at. And it will still say, just look. What I learned, and what the science of every craving agrees with, is that an urge unfed is a wave, not a tide. It builds, peaks somewhere inside 2 or 3 minutes, and passes if you can stand in it without acting. So build your stand in it move now, in advance. Cold. Mine was almost embarrassingly simple. Phone flat on the table, screen down, stand up, and do one physical thing. The dishes, 20 push-ups, out to the corner shop and back. Not to distract from the wave, just to have something for the body to do while the wave walks through. Count the wave down if it helps. It passes. It always passes, and here is the accounting that carried me. Every wave you stand through makes the next one measurably smaller, and every wave you feed resets the clock to day one. There's no neutral. Each urge is a fork with only those two roads. A word on relapse before we close, because you will relapse and the plan has to survive it. Some night in the 3rd or 4th week, usually after a good day, oddly, you'll find a window I forgot to list, and you'll look and you'll learn some small nothing, and the machine will get one hot meal and roar back for 2 days, and you'll conclude that all progress was an illusion. It wasn't. Relapse and withdrawal is not the road ending. It's a stumble on a road that keeps going in the same direction. Do not spend 1 hour on shame. Shame is fuel too. The machine eats absolutely anything. Note plainly what window you used. Close that window too. Resume. A man who checks once a month is in a different universe from the man who checked 50 times a day, and the graph only has to go one way on average, not every day. The vault is the private half of the cut. There is also a public half, the question of contact itself, and of all the almost contacts men invent, the goodbye message, the closure request, the pointed silence, the block she's meant to notice, the status she's meant to see. That's the next chapter, and its rule can be spoken in one line you already half know. Real silence has no message in it. Let's learn what that actually asks of you. Chapter 11. Silence with no message in it. You've heard of no contact. Everyone's heard of no contact. It's the one prescription the whole internet agrees on, and most men who attempt it fail. And they fail for a reason nobody tells them. They do no contact as a message. And a message, brother, is contact. Let me list the counterfeit silences, because I performed most of them, and you'll recognize your own. There's the announced departure, the final message that says you won't be messaging. I wish you well. I won't reach out again. It feels like dignity. It reads, receive it honestly from her side, as one more knock on the door, and worse, a knock that requests a receipt. Every announced exit secretly hopes to be contested. You know it's true, because imagine she'd replied, wait. No. You've done more than imagine it. Some part of you drafted this exact message because of that imagined wait. The goodbye that hopes to be interrupted is not a goodbye. It's bait with manners. There's the blockage gesture, blocking her everywhere, visibly, so the wall itself speaks. I did my deletions in exactly this spirit, and you already know from my story what they actually were. Fire alarms pulled by a man who wanted to be asked why he was leaving. If your block wants to be noticed, it's a message. She may never even see it, and there you'd be, performing to an empty theater, which was, when I finally saw my own deletions clearly, the precise shape of what I'd been doing all along. There's the staged recovery, the timed photograph, living your best life at the exact angle her rumored attention might arrive from, the story posted because she might view it, the gym transformation dedicated, silently, to an audience of one. This one's the most socially acceptable counterfeit, because at least the push-ups are real. But you can feel the difference in your own chest. Are you building a life, or building an exhibit? The test is brutal and simple. If you learned for certain she would never see any of it, would tonight's post still go up? And there's the noble vigil. No contact, no gestures, everything correct. While inside, you're keeping the silence the way a soldier keeps a post. Silent for her, waiting to be discovered being strong. That was my longest counterfeit. From outside I looked healed a full year before I was, and the tell was that my silence had a face turned toward her in it, listening for footsteps the whole time. What do all four counterfeits share? In every one, she is still the audience. The behavior changed, the orientation never did. The machine, remember, doesn't care what it burns. Hope, grievance, discipline, silence itself. It will run on renunciation as happily as on pursuit, so long as the renunciation is aimed at her. No contact, done as strategy, is just pursuit at a lower temperature. This is why the internet version fails. It's sold as a technique. Go dark and she'll feel the absence, which makes the silence itself a lever pulled at her, which keeps you exactly where you were, a man at a machine, waiting on a payout. Same casino. Quieter room. So here is the real thing, and notice how little it resembles a tactic. Real silence has no message in it. You don't announce it. Announcement is content. You don't block as theater. You quietly remove your own access, as we did in the last chapter, invisibly, because the audience was never the point. You don't perform your recovery at her. You conduct it, in rooms she'll never see. And you don't keep the silence like a vigil. You let the post go unmanned, which happens not by force, but by increments, the day there is finally somewhere else you're supposed to be. Real silence isn't something you send. It's what remains when you have stopped broadcasting on that frequency altogether. And its whole miracle, the entire mechanism of the cure, is that it has no mechanism. Nothing is supposed to happen next. For 4 years, everything you did had a supposed to happen next attached to it. This is the first act with no next. That's how you'll know it's real. It feels less like a move, and more like putting something down. Which brings me to the last message. Mine, because I promised you the story, and because, by some grace, after every draft I showed you in the drafts chapter, the thing I finally sent got this exactly right, once, at the very end. After her refusal, after my why, after her brief kind non-answer, the courtroom in me still had one motion left to file. And instead, sitting on the floor of my kitchen at some terrible hour, I wrote 3 sentences. I told her I heard her. I told her I was sorry the shape of my attention had ever made her feel like an option, because she had never been that to me, and, this was the sentence that cost the most, that I wouldn't be explaining or defending any of it further. I wished her, in words I kept playing on purpose, the full breadth of the life she was clearly building. No question mark anywhere in it. Nothing that requested anything back. Send. She replied with 2 words. A thank you. Perfectly kind, perfectly final. A door closing so gently you could barely hear the click. The last thing she ever said to me. And then came the moment I am most. It's strange to say proud. Let me say instead the moment I'd point to if you ask me where the recovery actually began. The machine rose one last time, on cue, with one last product, and the product was true, which is what made it dangerous. You could thank her back. Ordinary courtesy. Completely defensible. There's that word again. My whole 4 years in one word. One little reciprocal politeness, and the conversation stays technically alive, another beat, and who knows what. I put the phone down. I let her have the last word. It seems like nothing. 2 words unanswered. The world is full of unanswered thank yous, but you know and I know it wasn't nothing. It was, I think, the first genuinely new thing I had done in 4 years. Every prior act, however, varied its costume. Pursuit, retreat, gift, deletion, silence, even the apology itself, had kept the channel warm for one more exchange. Declining the last word closed the channel from my side, freely, with no audience, at the exact moment when continuing was still available and still defensible. Nothing was supposed to happen next, and nothing did. And I sat on my kitchen floor inside that nothing, and it did not kill me, and that was the first piece of real data that New Life ever produced. The silence was survivable. Not good yet. Survivable. Good came later, and much more slowly. So your protocol, stated once and cleanly. No announcement. You owe no press release, and the urge to send one is the machine drafting. No gestures. Nothing performed at her, ever again, in any direction, including the noble directions. If a practical matter genuinely requires contact someday, returning something, some entanglement of real life, it gets the tone of a courteous stranger settling paperwork. Brief, warm, neutral, complete, expecting nothing. And if she ever writes to you, it happens. Reactivated accounts, birthdays, the odd wave across a year. You are not required to be cold, because coldness is a message too. Remember, you are required only to be finished. A finished man can answer a hello like a man passing an old colleague on a station platform. Pleasantly, briefly, without checking over his shoulder afterward. And the real tell, without a theory forming anywhere in him about what the hello meant. Nothing means anything anymore on that channel. That's what closed is. Now. The contact is cut, the vault is burned, the silence is real, which leaves you alone at last with the actual grief. Because under all the machinery we've dismantled, chapter by chapter, there was a real loss, and it still has to be mourned like one. The complication is that the woman you must mourn never precisely existed, and the woman who exists must be released unmourned, with her real no intact. Untangling those two, and deciding what to do with the anger, and with the shame, and with your own forgiveness, is the next chapter. It's the funeral. You've been putting it off for years. Let's hold it properly. Chapter 12. A funeral for a woman who never existed. Here is the strangest fact of your condition, and I'm going to say it flatly, because you've earned the flat version by now. The woman who broke your heart does not exist. She never did. There is a real woman. She's out there tonight living her actual life, studying or working or cooking in a kitchen you've never seen, being ordinary and particular and finite the way all real people are. She has flaws you never got close enough to discover, moods you never had to weather, a Tuesday evening self that fantasy never has to survive. That woman told you no, clearly, consistently, from the first month, in conduct, and finally, in words. The real woman was never confusing, never cruel, and never, at any point, yours to lose. And then there's the other one. The one your chest is caved in over, built across 4 years of nights out of the best materials you had. Her face, yes, her real laugh, a handful of her real sentences, but assembled by you, animated by you, scripted by you. The one who was always about to turn toward you. The one whose silences meant longing and whose warmth meant more. The one who understood you completely in conversations that never took place, in a future that got demolished, in a house you furnished alone. That's the woman you're grieving. And she never drew a single breath. This is why your grief has been so unmanageable, why it hasn't followed any schedule your friends recognize. You've been trying to hold one funeral for 2 different women, and the service keeps collapsing, because the mourners keep confusing the coffins. So we're going to separate them, once, cleanly, and hold the 2 ceremonies this chapter. One release and one funeral. The real woman first, because her ceremony is short. You do not mourn the real woman. You release her, and releasing her means one specific thing, letting her no be final and hers, not final pending appeal. Not final until she matures, or final until she realizes, or final until fate engineers a meeting in some airport years from now. I kept that airport in inventory for an entire year, brother. I know every hidden clause a man can write into a release. Strike them all. Her no belongs to her the way your name belongs to you. It was not a puzzle, a test, a mood, or a phase. It was a competent adult's answer about her one life, and honoring it, fully, forever, including in the privacy of your own hopes, where nobody would ever catch you cheating, is the last real act of love available to you. It's also, and I mean this exactly, the only one she ever actually wanted from you. You spent 4 years giving her attention she never asked for. Give her the one thing she did ask for. Give her now the other one. The built woman. And here I have to correct the harsh reading before you make it, 'cause I made it. When I first understood that I had invented her, I went straight to contempt. 4 years mourning a hallucination. What kind of idiot? No, stop there. What you built her out of was real. The loneliness was real. The capacity for devotion was real. The vision of a shared life. The mornings, the jokes, the growing old. That vision is the healthiest material in you. It's the exact blueprint of what you're built to give someone. Your error was never in the wanting. It was one error, made once, early, and then compounded daily like interest. You attached all of that real wanting to a person who had already answered, and then defended the attachment against 4 years of evidence. The built woman was your real future, wearing the wrong face. So at her funeral, we don't burn the future, we take the face off it. The future goes back in your chest. It's yours. It always was. She was only ever the mannequin you dressed in it. What gets buried is just the attachment. The 4-year insistence that this future could only arrive through that door. Bury it how? Not with a ritual. I distrust rituals here. We said it about the relics, and it's true of ceremonies too. A dramatic midnight funeral is secretly one more performance, one more feeding. You bury it the way the previous chapters buried everything else, by stopping the maintenance. A fantasy is not a fire that needs putting out. It's a fire that needs you to stop carrying wood. Every time the built woman rises, and she will, at midnight, in songs, in the 3rd week, you simply decline the shift. You don't argue with her. Arguing is maintenance. You don't hate her. Hating is maintenance. You notice, there's the mannequin, and you put no wood on, and you turn to the next real thing in front of you, and the fire does what unfed fires do. It took mine most of a year to go fully cold. It goes. 2 more items belong in this grave, and then we close it. The anger and the shame. The anger first. Somewhere in you, under the sorrow, and most men need permission to admit this, so here's permission. There is fury. At her, still, some nights, whatever the clear-eyed chapters said. At the years, at the friends who watched and said nothing, at the internet that sold you hope by the hour, at God, at the sheer arithmetic of what you spent, and one layer down, where it actually lives, at yourself, because the prosecutor in you has quietly concluded that the true culprit, the one who ignored 3 withdrawals of a hand and a mountain of silence, was you. 2 things about that fire. First, anger at her is a debt already audited. We did it in her chapter. Every charge against her reclassified when you stood on her side of the glass, and when the anger resurges anyway, on the bad nights, treat it like the urge to check. A wave, not a truth. Stand in it. Feed it nothing. It passes. Second, the anger at yourself is the one that needs an actual verdict, so let's deliver it. You are guilty of exactly one thing: not of being unlovable, not of being a fool, not of being a creep, of self-deception sustained past its natural life. That's the whole charge sheet. And the sentence for that crime, in every court that deserves the name, is time served. 4 years, brother. You did the time before the trial. What remains is not punishment. What remains is the one thing courts can't order, which is that you not re-offend, against yourself or against the next woman who is kind to you. That's the entire penalty. Pay it forward, not backward, which is also the answer to the shame, the flinch inventory, the resentful messages, the monitoring, the deleting and reappearing, all of it. Shame wants one of two false exits: rationalization, anyone would have, or the life sentence, this is what I am. Refuse both. The clean middle is the oldest technology there is. Name it truly, without discount, which this book has now helped you do. Repair what admits repair. Mostly, here, that means conducting yourself impeccably from now on, since direct amends would themselves be contact and therefore harm. And then close the account. Closed accounts may be remembered. Memory is fine. Memory is the scar that proves healing, but they may not be reopened nightly for fresh audits. The 3 a.m. re-audit of your own past behavior is, you're ahead of me now. Maintenance. Same fire, no wood. And when the grave is closed, both coffins, the release and the funeral, the anger and the shame in with them, you'll notice something that frightens men more than the grief did, and I want you braced for it. Emptiness. The machine is gone. The vigil is gone. The courtroom is adjourned. The future has no face on it. And suddenly, your evenings are enormous and quiet, and nobody is coming to fill them. For 4 years, every hour had an assignment. Now the hours just stand there, looking at you. Good. That's not the wound, that's the cleared land. The next chapter is about what we build on it. The attention, finally, going somewhere real. It's the chapter where your actual life, the one that's been waiting in the car this whole time, gets to come in. Chapter 13. Where the attention goes now. Let me tell you about the least cinematic year of my life, which was also the one that saved it. Every recovery story you've ever been sold has a montage in it. The man rises from the ashes, shaves, runs at dawn, builds the business, and 18 months later walks through the world reborn while the music swells. I need you to delete that montage, because chasing it nearly wrecked my actual recovery twice. The montage is just the machine's final costume, the same old engine, repainted, a performance of transformation, staged for an audience of one woman who is not watching, scored against a deadline, graded in before and after. A man doing push-ups at a ghost is still facing the ghost. The real thing is slower, smaller, and almost embarrassingly ordinary, and I'll tell it to you the way it happened. The first thing I did, weeks before I felt ready, which is the only time anything gets done in that season, was pick up the piece of work I had done badly during the years and do it again, properly. Not to prove anything, because it was there, and it was mine, and it had been done at 40% by a man who was checking a phone, and some quiet corner of me had never stopped being ashamed of that. So I sat down at my desk on ordinary weekday evenings, the same evenings that used to belong to the intervals, and I gave it the full beam of my attention. And brother, I have to report what happened, because I'd forgotten it was possible. The work absorbed me. 2 hours went by without me consulting my own misery once, It was the first vacation for myself in 4 years. That's a secret nobody puts on the posters. Deep attention to almost anything real is relief. Not meaning, not yet, just relief, the way water is relief. And unlike her attention, the work's response to mine was perfectly correlated. Everything I gave it, it held. Nothing I gave it vanished into an interval. Do you know what it does to a starved nervous system to be paid every single time? Start there. Start with any real thing that pays every time. Work, a craft, a language, an engine, a garden. Not as therapy. As physics, attention has to land somewhere, and you are done letting it land on glass. The second thing was slower and cost more. The people. Loneliness built the machine. We said it in the first chapters, and it's worth saying with all the lights on. No man wires his entire nervous system to one distant woman unless the seats near him are mostly empty. Mine were empty because I had emptied them. The friend I'd answered in half sentences for 2 years, the family gatherings I'd attended at 40%, the colleagues who'd stopped extending invitations a man keeps deflecting. So I did the unglamorous thing. I called my oldest friend, the November one, and I told him the whole story, out loud, start to finish, no editing for dignity. It took 2 evenings. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. The medicine wasn't his opinion. It was the fact of the story existing outside my skull at last, in a kitchen, between 2 men, where it instantly became what it had always been. Not an epic, just a sad, human, survivable thing that happens. A secret obsession is a greenhouse too, you see. Spoken air kills it. Then I started showing up to things. Dinners I'd have deflected. The nephew's birthday, at 100% this time. Phone in the car. Tea with my mother, where I asked her questions and heard the answers land. None of it fixed anything on any given Tuesday. All of it, compounded over months, turned out to be the actual difference between the men who get out and the men who just get quiet. Presence, restored in person, one unremarkable evening at a time, with people who never once needed me to be impressive, only there. And the days themselves? Here is my honest report on the texture of that year, and I give it to you because false advertising is how recoveries die. The days were dull. I want to say it exactly. Dull, gray, flattish, unassigned, no fireworks in either direction. After 4 years at the slot machine, ordinary life has no jackpots in it, and for a while your recalibrating nervous system reads peace as deprivation. Men relapse right there, mistaking the quiet for proof that the obsession was life, and this is the aftermath. Hold the line. The dullness is not your new condition. It's the sound of your gain control being repaired. 6 months in, without one dramatic day intervening, I noticed the days had gone from dull to fine. Just fine. A meal that tasted good. Work that went well. An evening walk where my mind wandered to nothing in particular and came back unbruised. And one night on that walk it stopped me in the street. Nothing hurts right now. No event had caused it. It had assembled itself, invisibly, out of 100 fed and slept and worked and accompanied ordinary days. That's the actual milestone, and no one applauds it, and it's worth more than every milestone anyone applauds. Now, the relapse map, because the ambushes are scheduled, and a man who knows the schedule survives it. Her birthday. Your birthday. Worse, usually. Birthday's audit. The month 3 ambush, which comes precisely because you're better. The pain quiets, the machine's absence gets mistaken for her absence, and a treacherous nostalgia proposes one harmless look. The dreams. Nobody warns men about the dreams. Your sleeping brain will stage reunions of unbearable tenderness for months, and you'll wake with the whole weight restored for a morning. It's replay, not prophecy. Make tea, it recedes by noon. The songs, the street corners, the season itself, the first return of the weather that was happening when it all happened, and the two heavyweights. News of her, arriving unbidden through mutual channels. You can't unbuild every road. When it comes, receive it like weather from a country you no longer live in. Noted, unfollowed up, no forecast constructed. And someday, brace now, in advance, while it's cheap, the engagement, the wedding, the child, hers. It's coming. She is young and warm and clear, and the world marries such people. When it arrives, the old organ will produce one deep note of loss. Allow it. One note is honest, and then you'll do what you now know how to do with waves. What you will not do is the archaeology, the who is he, the comparison, the timeline math. That dig is the machine asking for one last season. The site is closed. And through all of it, one background discipline, the quietest one. Watch where the attention pools. That's the whole dashboard now. Not do I still think of her. You will decreasingly for a long time. Thoughts are weather. Watch instead where the deliberate attention goes. The spendable kind. The kind you once shipped off daily to a screen. Is it landing on things that pay, the work, the people at the table, the body, the small competences of a life? Then you are recovering, whatever today felt like. Is it pooling again around a phone, a window, a ghost? Anyone's ghost? Then run the protocols. You own them all now. There's one last subject, and I've saved it deliberately, because it can only be handled by a man who has walked this far. The next woman. Not as replacement. Nothing about her is about replacement, but as the final examination this whole education was for. Because someday, in a market or a meeting or at somebody's wedding, attention is going to stir in you again, and in that moment you will either repeat the 4 years or redeem them, and the difference will come down to one capacity, the one this entire story was missing from its first afternoon. The next chapter is about that capacity. It's about becoming a man who can be told no. Chapter 14. The man who can be told number. Run the whole story back, mine, yours, any of the 1,000 versions of it, and ask what single capability installed in that man on the first afternoon would have prevented all of it. Not confidence, I had a public sort of confidence. Not intelligence, we've established intelligence was the accelerant. Not even self-respect, exactly, though that's warmer. It's this, the ability to be refused and survive it on the spot in the open. Look at what actually drove every fatal choice. Why did I never state my intention on the hillside, that first month, when the whole thing could have been settled at the cost of one awkward afternoon? Because stating it risked a no, there, in the open air, with no deniability to hide in. Why the 4 years of letters that never declared? Same answer. Why the jokes, the armor, the pretexts, the gifts that said everything except the one thing, the confession finally engineered with a laugh stitched in so refusal wouldn't officially count? Same answer, every time, all the way down. The entire 4-year architecture, every deniable approach, every decent interval, every unspoken hope, was a single continuous engineering project with one design specification, that no refusal should ever be able to land on me cleanly. I built my whole conduct so that I could not be told no, and now watch the consequence, because it's the punchline of the entire book. The man who cannot be told no is also the man who can never truly be told yes. A yes only exists as an answer to an asked question. I never asked one. Not really, not until the end, and even then in armor. So for 4 years, I lived in the only place available to a man who won't risk the no, the interval between the two answers, the maybe, the gap. Brother, the gap you lived in was not her ambiguity, and it wasn't fate. We established that. Here is its true name. The gap was your unasked question, inhabited. You furnished the space where an answer should have been, and lived in it, because as long as the question stayed unasked, the no stayed unspoken. And some part of you preferred an eternal maybe to a mortal no. That's the disease under the disease. The obsession, the checking, the 4 years, all of it grew in the shelter of a question you would not risk asking. So the cure, the once and for all you ask this book for, is not a rule about texting or a number of days of no contact. It's this capacity, and it can be built. Becoming a man who can hear no and remain standing. Everything else in this book was surgery. This is the immune system that keeps you from ever needing the surgery again. What does the capacity look like installed? Let me describe that man, the one I've been slowly becoming, later in life than I'd like, and the one you're now free to become on a better schedule. He finds out early. Not rudely, not with an ultimatum on the first afternoon. Early is a spirit, not a stopwatch. It means that when interest stirs in him, he lets it be visible and answerable within weeks, not years. He says some plain version of, "I'd like to take you to dinner," meaning it the way it sounds, carrying it the way a man carries something he's decided to carry. That sentence is not a performance of boldness. It's a question, honestly asked, with both answers genuinely permitted. And both answers are good news. Hear that properly, because it sounds like a slogan, and it's actually just arithmetic. A yes opens a door onto something real, and a no closes, in one inexpensive moment, a corridor he might otherwise have haunted for 4 years. The no is not the failure case. The no is the fire exit. I once paid 4 years for an answer this man gets for the price of one strange evening. He is not braver than me. He's just done the math. He asks so that he can be told no. That's the deep grammar of it. His questions have landing pads. When the no comes, and it comes for every man who asks real questions, regularly, forever. It lands, it stings briefly and honestly, like cold water, and then it's information, not a verdict on his worth. The audit of his worth is not outsourced anymore. That ledger stays home now, in his own keeping. Her no means the specific thing it says. She doesn't want this, and carries no writer about what he is. He can hold, at the same time, without strain. I am a man of real value, and this particular woman doesn't want what I offered. Both true, no contradiction, no appeal filed. The men you know who seem strangely at ease around women, it was never technique. It's just this. Nothing they're asking for is being held hostage. They can afford the answer. Affording the answer is the entire secret, and it can't be faked. And the good news, it can't be hidden either. It reads off a man like posture. It's what confidence always actually was. And he extends the same clean grammar outward because, and this surprised me, the capacity turns out not to be about women at all. Watch where else the old disease lived in you. The raise never asked for, at the job, for years, because asking risked a no from a man whose no you couldn't afford. The friendship left ambiguous. The father never plainly asked for what you needed from him. The opinion swallowed in every room where disagreement risked the group's flicker of a no. The same architecture, brother. Deniability, decent intervals, hoping to be understood without the risk of declaring one design specification everywhere, your whole life. She was never the disease. She was the place the disease bloomed largest. The cure installed upgrades every room you stand in. You become, across the board, a man who says what he wants, hears what's said back, and stays standing either way. There's an old word for that man. The word is honest. Honest one level deeper than not lying. Honest at the level of wanting. Now, the next woman. Someday attention will stir. A face, a quickness, that lift in the chest. And the first thing to tell you is, the lift is not the enemy. Don't let this story leave you afraid of your own capacity to want. That fear just builds the opposite prison, and I've watched men wall themselves into it, calling the wall wisdom. The lift is life. What changes is what happens in the next hour, because you know now exactly what your workshop does with 3 data points and a hungry evening. It drafts a whole woman, remember, and falls for the draft. So the new discipline is 1 sentence long. Go find out before the workshop can build. Reality, early and often, is the whole program. The weekday test, the actual table, the real conversation, where a real woman gets the chance to be a person in front of you before she can be conscripted as a mannequin. Ask early. Hear the answer. If it's yes, be there. At 100%, phone in the car. You know how now. You practiced on your own family. If it's no, tip your cap. Feel the cold water and walk on, whole, with the corridor closed and your years intact. And notice, quietly, without ceremony, what you just did with 4 years of tuition. You spent 1 evening instead. That man, the one who can be told no, is the finished product of everything this book has walked through. He needed the vault burned, the silence real, both funerals held, the attention rehomed. There was no shortcut to him, which is why the shortcut industry never mentions him. There's 1 chapter left now, and it's short, because endings should be. It's about the evening I found out the silence had finished its work, and about the last thing I have to hand you before you go. Chapter 15. Ordinary. I said I'd tell you how I found out it was over. Here is the whole scene. It lasted maybe 10 seconds. It was an ordinary weekday evening, about 2 years after the 2 words. I'd worked well that day. I was walking home the long way, past the market. The market. I'd stopped detouring around it somewhere in the 2nd year without noticing I'd stopped, and a song came out of a shop doorway. One of hers. One of the ones from the Vault-era playlists. A song that had, in its day, been able to fold me in half on a footpath. And what happened was, I noticed it was a good song. That's all. That's the entire event. No wave, no counter-move needed, no standing through required. The song played, and it was just a song. And she was just a person I used to know, somewhere out in the world. Presumably well, hopefully well. And the hope was easy, weightless, the kind you'd have for an old classmate. I walked on. It took me most of a block to realize what had just not happened, and I stopped, and stood there in the street with my hands in my pockets and laughed once, quietly, at nothing, like a man finding money in an old coat. Nobody applauds that moment. There's no one to tell. What would you even say? A song played and I felt normal? But I'm telling you, brother, because you're the one person who can hear its actual size, that moment is the summit. Not triumph, not transcendence, not a new woman, not revenge success, none of the things the montage promised. Ordinariness. The thing was, at last, ordinary. The 4 years had become what everything eventually becomes if you stop feeding it and let it. A story that happened to me once, sad in places, instructive in places, mine, filed at last in the past tense, where it had been trying to get to for years while I held it in the present by force. That's what once and for all turns out to mean. I owe you this correction as we close, because you came to this book wanting a door that locks behind you, and I let you want it. There is no lock. What there is this: a set of practices that became habits. Habits that became a character, and a character in which the old machine simply has nothing to grip. You'll think of her again, next month, next year, at some wedding when a certain kind of laugh crosses the room. The thought will come and land and find no fuel, no vault, no open channel, no unasked question to shelter in, and it will pass through you like the song through that doorway. That's the cure, not the absence of the memory, the absence of the machinery. So the last page, let me put the whole book in your pocket, small enough to carry. You loved, or thought you did, a woman who was clear from the first month, and you were not a fool. You were an intelligent, loyal, lonely man, whose best faculties got captured by an old and well-documented machine, and everything it did to you, it did with your own virtues. She was never a villain, and never a prize. She was a person who was clear, and was not heard, and who owes you nothing. Not her reasons, not her understanding, not one more word. You do not get to be understood by her. You get something better, and it was never in her keeping. You get to be free. The way out is not a secret, and now you own all of it. Cut the access quietly, without a gesture. Burn the vault. Let the silence be real. No message in it, no face turned toward her, no audience. Hold both funerals. Release the real woman with her no intact, and bury the built one, and keep the future she was wearing, because that future is yours, and it's still good. Serve no more time on the anger or the shame. The sentence was time served, and you served it. Put the attention, that enormous, misdirected, magnificent attention of yours, 4 years of proof of just how much you can give, put it daily on things that pay, the work, the people at your table, the body, the small hours of an honest life. Expect the dull season and walk through it. Dull is the sound of healing. Expect the ambushes and stand through them. Waves, not tides. And build, ask by ask, the man who can be told no, the man who finds out early, affords the answer, and lives in questions instead of gaps. And then one evening, I can't tell you the date, nobody gets told the date. You'll close some perfectly ordinary conversation, put the phone down without checking anything, and notice the silence of your own room. And it won't be the silence you're sitting in tonight, the one with her shape pressed into it, the one that hums. It will just be quiet, survivable, and then, a little after that, not even a thing that needs surviving. Just the sound of an evening, your evening. In a life that belongs, entirely and at last, to you. That evening is already on its way to you. It started moving the moment you picked up this book, and it comes faster with every feeding you skip, every window you close, every wave you stand through, every real thing you touch instead. I was 4 years in the gap, and more than 2 years in the valley, and I made it out carrying more weight than you're carrying, with less help than you have now. You have a map. I was drawing it in the dark. So go. Wash the cup in your sink. Call the friend who's been calling you. Do 1 hour of real work with the phone in the other room tonight before you sleep. The first skipped feeding, the first stone of the road out. She was the coin. The machine is cold. The 4 years are over. They ended, in fact, some time ago. You're just the last one to be told. Welcome back, brother. It's ordinary here. You're gonna love it.